ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं त्वं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादां सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च। हे कृष्णकरुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौरांगी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Continuing, thank you, Koladvipa Prabhu. We'll continue reading from the Ramayana, Yuddhakanda. Before entering the city, however, Ram stopped at the ashram of Bharadwaj Rishi to inquire about his relatives' welfare before meeting them. After happily welcoming Rama, Bharadwaj replied to his inquiries, saying, "In your absence, Bharata has been living a life of severe renunciation, wearing deerskin and tree bark and keeping matted hair. He has been ruling the kingdom as your subordinate by keeping your shoes on the royal throne. O Rama, by dint of my mystic power, I know that you have removed the burden of the earth. Therefore, I would be pleased to award you any benediction you desire." Rama happily replied, "Let all of the trees along the way to Ayodhya become filled with fruits and flowers. Let streams of honey flow down from the trees, exuding the fragrance of nectar." As soon as his words were spoken, the trees along the way to Ayodhya immediately filled up with sumptuous fruit. Seeing this miraculous transformation, thousands of monkeys quickly jumped down from the Pushpak chariot and began feasting to their full satisfaction. Rama was always thinking of how he could reward the monkeys for their selfless service. Thus, it pleased him to see them satisfied in this manner. Turning to Hanuman, Rama said, "Please inform Guha of my arrival. Then go to Nandigram and describe to Bharat all the events concerning Sita's abduction and her subsequent recovery. Watch carefully the expression on Bharata's face when he hears of my arrival. Then report back to me before we depart from this ashrama. If Bharata wishes to rule the kingdom himself, whether due to attachment for position, power, or royal luxury, or even from Kaikeyi's urging, I will be happy to allow him to do so." Hanuman took a human form and departed, traveling through the air. He first informed Guha that Rama would come to meet him after spending the night at Bharadwaja's ashram. Upon his arrival at Nandigram, Hanuman saw Bharat dressed in tree bark and wearing matted hair. Bharata was living in a small cottage, subsisting only on the fruits and roots, and he appeared to be very miserable and emaciated. Hanuman then approached Bharata, announcing, I have come here. I have come as a messenger from Ram. He inquires about your welfare and wishes to inform you that he will soon return to Ayodhya. When he heard these glorious words, Bharata's face immediately lit up with great delight. Then, becoming exhilarated with transcendental emotion, he fainted to the ground. Upon coming to his senses, Bharata stood up and embraced Hanuman with great satisfaction. Then, while bathing Hanuman with torrents of tears, Bharata said, Because you have brought me this good news, I shall immediately reward you with 100,000 cows, 100 villages, and 16 virgin girls to marry. Now, please sit down and tell me everything that happened during Rama's exile. Once Hanuman had finished telling Bharata everything of Rama's exile up to the point of his imminent return, Bharata exclaimed, My long cherished wish has finally been fulfilled. Bharata then ordered Shatrughna to make all arrangements for Rama's reception. Thus, Sumantra and the other ministers soon arrived at Nandigram riding elephants. Kaushalya, Sumitra, and Kaikeyi then arrived on palanquins, while engineers hurriedly constructed a new road connecting Nandigram with Ayodhya. After all arrangements had been made, Bharata picked up Rama's sandals, a white royal umbrella, and chamaras. Then, accompanied by many Brahmanas, he left his cottage amidst the blowing of conch shells and the beating of drums. The news of Rama's arrival had spread instantly, and almost the entire population of Ayodhya came to Nandigram hoping to see him. Bharata was accompanied by ministers, priests, and other respectable citizens, by professional musicians vibrating pleasing musical sounds, and by learned Brahmanas loudly chanting the Vedic hymns. Following in the procession were chariots drawn by beautiful horses with harnesses of golden rope. These chariots were decorated by flags with golden embroidery and by other flags of various sizes and patterns. There were soldiers bedecked with golden armor, servants bearing betel nut, and many well-known and beautiful society girls. Many servants followed on foot, bearing an umbrella, whisks, different grades of precious jewels, and other paraphernalia befitting a royal reception. However, when after some time there was no sign of Rama, Bharata anxiously said to Hanuman, I pray you are not exhibiting your frivolous monkey nature by joking with me. Hanuman then pointed out to the distance where clouds of dust were being raised by the approaching monkeys. Just then, a far-off roaring came to be heard. When Hanuman suddenly sighted the Pushpaka chariot in the distance, he shouted, Here comes Sri Ram! A loud spontaneous cheer suddenly arose from the crowd as they too sighted the Pushpaka chariot, which appeared to be just like a full moon rising in the sky. Everyone respectfully got down from their chariots, elephants and horses, as did Bharata began worshipping Rama from a distance. With folded hands, Bharata recited prayers in glorification of Lord Rama, and he offered water and other paraphernalia in worship. Finally, when Bharata could clearly see Rama glowing magnificently at the front of the Pushpaka chariot, he bowed down with great reverence. As the celestial airship landed, Bharata rushed forward and climbed onto the chariot to greet his older brother. Rama immediately got up from his seat to embrace Bharata, taking him on his lap. Bharata, his heart softened in ecstasy and his eyes full of tears, approached Lord Ramachandra and fell at his lotus feet with great ecstatic love. Lord Ramachandra saw that Bharata was much emaciated and heard that in his absence his brother was eating only barley cooked in the urine of a cow, covering his body with the bark of the trees, wearing matted locks of the hair, and lying down on the mattress of Kusha. The most merciful Lord Ram very much lamented this. Afterwards, Bharata greeted Lakshmana and Sita, showering them with praise. He then greeted Sugriva by embracing him, saying, Although we are four, you are now just like our fifth brother. Meanwhile, Rama approached his mother Kaushalya and lovingly clasped her feet. Then, one after another, Rama greeted Sumitra, Kaikeyi, and Vashishta, while all the citizens came forward with folded hands to welcome him. Accompanied by Sita and Lakshmana, Lord Ramachandra then offered his respectful obeisances unto the learned Brahmanas and the elderly persons in the family, and all the citizens of Ayodhya offered their respectful obeisances unto the Lord. The citizens of Ayodhya, upon seeing their king return after a long absence, offered him flower garlands, waved their upper cloths, and danced in great jubilation. Thereafter, Bharata came before Ram and Ram's wooden shoes in hand. While carefully placing the slippers upon Rama's lotus feet, Bharata said, "Here is the kingdom I have overseen in your absence. By your mercy, Ayodhya is flourishing, and the treasury, storehouses, and army have all increased tenfold. My duty is now over, and I hereby relinquish everything unto you." After offering the wooden shoes before Lord Ramchandra, Lord Bharata stood with folded hands, his eyes full of tears, and Lord Ramchandra bathed Bharata with tears while embracing with both arms for a long time. After this, Rama ordered the Pushpaka chariot to return to its rightful owner, the god of wealth Kuvera. Thus, the celestial vehicle ascended into the sky, headed toward the north. Then, as Rama sat at the feet of his spiritual master Vashishta, Bharata came before him and requested, "My dear elder brother, please install yourself upon the royal throne without further delay and resume a life of royal luxury." Hare Krishna. Lord Ramachandra then entered Ayodhya in the midst of a great festival. He was greeted on the road by the princely order, who showered his body with beautiful, fragrant flowers, while great personalities like Lord Brahma and other demigods glorified the activities of the Lord in jubilation. The family priest Vashishta had Lord Ramachandra cleanly shaved, freeing him from his matted locks of hair. After bathing, Bharata at last again dressed in royal style and was decorated with a garland and ornaments. The three mothers were similarly adorned Sita, and the wives of monkeys were similarly dressed and ornamented. Next, at Shatrughna's command, Sumantra came before Rama with a lavishly decorated chariot. Rama graciously mounted it, and Bharata took up the reins, while Shatrughna held the royal white umbrella. On either side of Rama stood Lakshmana and Vibhishana, waving a fan and chamara, while from the sky the demigods and celestial rishis glorified Rama with carefully chosen words. As Rama proceeded toward Ayodhya, a huge procession followed him, as all the monkeys, appearing in human form, rode elephants. Thereafter, when Rama entered his capital, he saw how all the citizens had come out of their houses, lining the streets to welcome him. Men and women, children and the elderly, gazed upon Rama as though they were getting back their lost lives. While waving their cloths and jumping with excitement, people shouted, "Our beloved prince has returned. All glories to Lord Ram, the maintainer of his devotees." Amid the playing of musicians and the chanting of Vedic hymns, Rama glanced lovingly over his subjects. Rama greeted his ministers and described to them his political alliances with the monkeys and Vibhishana. Thus he came to his father's place. Hare Krishna. I welcome all the devotees who just came. We are reading from the Ramayana because next week is Ram Navami, so we are just reading. We are, I think, in the last stretch. We are reading at the section where Lord Ram comes back to Ayodhya after his Rama greeted his ministers and described to them his political alliances with the monkeys and Vibhishana. Thus he came to his father's palace. Rama ordered that his own palace be given for Sugriva's use. Bharata then took the monkey king by the hand and led him there. At Bharata's request, Jambavan, Hanuman, Gavaya, and Rishabha brought water from the four seas, while 500 powerful monkeys brought water from 500 sacred rivers. The vessels of water were then placed before Vashishta, and thereafter the rishis seated Rama and Sita upon a throne made of valuable jewels. Assisted by Vamadeva, Jabali, Kashyapa, Katyayana, Suyagna, Gautama, and Vijaya rishis, Vashishta performed the bathing ceremony, with the first ablutions performed by the Brahmanas. Next, Rama was bathed by a virgin girl, followed by his minister, the leading warriors, and Vaishyas, one after another. After the final bathing, Vasishta ordered the four Lokapalas and other chief demigods witnessing the coronation from the sky to sprinkle Rama with herbs. Then, as Rama sat upon a golden throne bedecked with valuable gems, Vashishta placed the royal crown upon his head and decorated his body with golden ornaments. The crown, formerly worn by all the kings in the Ikshvaku dynasty, was made by Lord Brahma especially for the coronation of Vaivasvat Manu. At Indra's prompting, Vayu placed a garland made from 100 golden lotus flowers around Rama's neck and presented him with a celestial necklace of pearls and gems. Shatrughna held the royal umbrella over Rama's head as Sugriva and Vibhishana fanned him from both the sides. Thereafter, as Gandharvas sang and Apsaras danced in ecstasy, Rama gave in charity 100,000 cows, 300 million gold coins, and all varieties of precious jewels to the Brahmanas. Rama presented Sugriva with a celestial necklace and gave Angada a pair of bracelets adorned with diamonds and precious stones. Rama presented Sita a necklace previously given to him by Vayu, along with many lavishly decorated dresses. Sita desired to present Hanuman with a gift as a token of her appreciation for all he had done for her. With this in mind, she unclasped the necklace Rama had given her and looked toward Rama questioningly. Understanding her intention, Rama requested Sita to present the monkey, Hanuman. Thus she happily placed it around his neck. Thereafter, all the monkey chiefs were given valuable clothing and ornaments. In this way, Rama's coronation came to a successful conclusion. Completely satisfied at heart, the monkeys returned to their respective kingdoms, while Vibhishana returned to Lanka. When everyone had taken their leave, Rama said to Lakshmana, "My dear brother, now that I have been installed upon the throne, I wish to install you as my heir apparent." Despite being repeatedly urged in this way, Lakshmana remained silent, for he refused to accept the proposal. Rama could well understand the mind of Lakshmana. Thus, he finally conferred the honor upon Bharata. Rama ruled the earth from his capital Ayodhya for 11,000 years. During that time, he performed many sacrifices, including 100 horse sacrifices. During the reign of Lord Rama, the forests, rivers, the hills and mountains, the states, the 7 islands, and the 7 seas were all favorable in supplying the necessities of life for all living beings. All bodily and mental suffering, disease, old age, bereavement, lamentation, distress, fear, fatigue were completely absent. There were no widows to lament the loss of their husbands, nor there were diseases or thieves. Indeed, even wild animals gave up their natural enmity. You can't stand on that step. Yeah. Thank you. And thus they did not kill one another. All the citizens were fully righteous, always looking toward Rama as their Lord and Master. Beyond that, they saw Rama as their life and soul. Everyone lived for thousands of years and had thousands of sons. There was even no death for those who did not want it. All talk centered around Rama alone. Thus the entire earth appeared as if it had transformed into the kingdom of God, Vaikuntha. Lava and Kusha then concluded their narration. Anyone who listens daily to this wonderful story, known as the Ramayana, will become free from all sinful reactions. This sacred narration grants prowess, longevity, and victory to those who subdue their passions and hear it with faith. The reader of this Ramayana, if a woman, will receive sons, if a king, will conquer the earth, if a traveler, will reach his destination, and if a sinful person, will be purified. The next chapter is Uttarakanda. Any questions? Everybody doing okay? If you want some water, it's right there. If you want, there is maybe a little bit of prasad, so help yourself. Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah. Uttarakanda. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming. Soon after Rama's coronation, all the great rishis came to Ayodhya to personally worship him and glorify his wonderful transcendental pastimes. The Saptarishis, Vashishta, Kashyapa, Atri, Vishwamitra, Gautama, Jamadagni, and Bharadwaj, arrived at the royal palace, as did Kaushika, Kanva, Agastya, and Dhaumya. When the gatekeeper informed him that these exalted rishis had arrived, Rama had them escorted into the royal court and stood with folded hands to greet them. Rama arranged comfortable seats for the sages and then offered them ceremonial worship and innumerable cows in charity. When the rishis were seated at ease, Rama respectfully inquired of their welfare. The rishis said, "O Rama, you have certainly satisfied us by descending on the earth to exhibit your magnanimous pastimes. Now that Ravana is dead, we feel relief and happiness, for he was a great impediment to the progressive welfare of the world. Indeed, not only Ravana, but also many others, such as Khara, Maricha, Kumbhakarna, Atikaya, Nikumba, and Kumbha, were terrorizing all the living entities." You can use seats, please. Okay. Thus, we are very grateful to you for destroying them. We are especially thankful that Indrajit is dead. There was no one comparable to Indrajit, even among the demigods, demons, and Rakshasas. Except for yourself and Lakshmana, he could not have been slain by anyone within the three worlds. Interrupting the sages, Rama curiously inquired, "O best of the rishis, why do you praise Indrajit even more than Kumbhakarna or Ravana? How is it that he became more powerful than his father and was able to defeat Indra, the king of heaven?" On behalf of the sages, Agastya replied by narrating the following history. Long ago in Satyayuga, there lived a great Brahmarshi named Pulastya, who was son of Lord Brahma. Once upon a time, Pulastya went to the ashram of the great sage Trinabindhu on the slopes of Mount Meru to perform severe austerities. Because of the scenic beauty of this celestial place, the Apsaras frequently came there. Thus, along with Trinabindhu's daughter, they would play, sing, and accompany themselves with musical instruments. It so happened that one day, while enjoying themselves in this way, the Apsaras unintentionally disrupted Pulastya's meditation. Becoming highly angered, the rishi cursed the girls, saying, "Whoever I see coming nearby again will become pregnant simply by my glance." The Apsaras fearfully ran away, never daring to return to that place. The daughter of Trinabindhu, however, was not present that day and was unaware of the rishi's curse. Thus, the next day, when she came to play with her friends in the usual manner, she came within the sight of Pulastya. Consequently, she found out that she was pregnant, although without any apparent cause, and became extremely pale with fear. Returning home, she stood before her father, hanging her head in shame. Trinabindhu was quite surprised to see how his daughter's body had become transformed, and he anxiously inquired, "How has this happened, my child?" The girl replied, "I wandered near the ashram of Pulastya in search of my friends, when suddenly I found myself to be pregnant. I do not know why." Trinabindhu then entered a trance of meditation, and by the dint of his mystic vision, he was able to perceive how Pulastya's curse was the cause of his daughter's pregnancy. Trinabindhu then took his daughter to Pulastya and requested him to accept her as his wife. Since he was already inclined to have her, Pulastya agreed. Thus, from that time onward, Trinabindhu's daughter began serving him with great love and devotion. Later, after becoming pleased with his wife's service, Pulastya said, "I shall now give you a son who will be my equal, ensuring that my hereditary line will continue. Because you always listen to the Vedas while I am engaged in reciting them, your son's name will be Vishrava." Soon Pulastya's wife gave birth to a son, and because the boy was pure and detached, he spent his time engaged in austerities. In consideration of Vishrava's exalted qualities, the great sage Bharadwaj later gave his daughter Idavida to him in marriage. Then after some time, Vishrava desired to beget a son who would promote the spiritual welfare of the masses of people. Thereafter, an exalted son was born to Idavida. This child was given the name Vaishravana by the sages who understood that in future he would take the post of Kuvera, the Lord of Wealth. When he grew up, Vaishravana began performing austerities, maintaining his body only with water. Gradually, Vaishravana reduced its intake only to air, and finally he even stopped breathing. In this way, 1000 years passed quickly, seemingly like a single year. Lord Brahma became pleased with Vaishravana's austerities and appeared before him, accompanied by all the demigods. When offered a benediction, Vaishravana expressed his desire to become Lokapala. Lord Brahma then replied, "Indeed, I was already prepared to appoint you a fourth Lokapala. I therefore grant you your wish. You may assume the post of Kuvera, the Lord of Wealth, and thus become equal in greatness to three other Lokapalas, namely Yamaraj, Indra, and Varuna. Additionally, I shall award you the celestial vehicle befitting your exalted position. Here is the Pushpaka chariot." Lord Brahma departed, and because the universal grandsire had not designated a place of residence for him, Vaishravana went to his father Vishrava, and Vishrava said, "My dear son, you may reside at the city of Lanka, located on the Trikuta mountain." Vishwakarma built this place for the habitation of the Rakshasas. However, Lanka is now vacant since the Rakshasas long fled in fear of Lord Vishnu and have taken up their residence in Rasatala. Following his father's order, Vaishravana took up residence at Lanka. In due course, because of his good rule, the place came to flourish and was filled with citizens known as Nairatas. Now and then, Vaishravana would mount his chariot and visit his parents. Rama sat listening to Agastya's discourse with great pleasure. However, he again politely interrupted, saying, "While I am anxious to hear the continuation of the story, I am curious to understand some points. Under what circumstances had Rakshasas previously come to inhabit Lanka? I have heard that Rakshasas were originally born from the eyebrows of Pulastya. However, it now appears that their origin must be different. Who is the actual ancestors of the original Rakshasas? How powerful were they in comparison to Ravana? Why were they driven away from Lanka by Lord Vishnu and made to reside below the earth?" Agastya continued his narration in sweet words. In the beginning of cosmic manifestation, Lord Brahma created the oceans and then living entities. When the created beings became tormented by hunger and thirst, they approached Lord Brahma and asked him what they should do. While laughing heartily, Brahma replied, "You should protect Raksha, the ocean, by all means." Some of the created beings responded by saying, "We shall protect Raksha," while others said, "We shall eat Yaksha." Lord Brahma then proclaimed that the former group would be known as Rakshasas and the later as Yakshas. There were two leaders of Rakshasas, namely Heti and Praheti. Praheti was naturally inclined toward virtue. Thus he retired to the forest to perform austerities. Heti wanted to marry and was on his own initiative married Bhaya, Yama's sister. Also, being the sister of Kala, Bhaya was a most fearsome personality. Through her, Heti begot a son named Vidyutkesha. When Vidyutkesha grew up, Heti arranged his daughter to the daughter of Sandhya, named Salaka Tanakata. Later on, Salaka Tanakata gave birth to a son on the slopes of Mount Mandara. But since he had only desired to enjoy sex with her husband and not to bear a child, she abandoned the baby after delivery. When the neglected child began to cry, he was seen by Lord Shiva, who happened to be passing on his bull carrier along with his wife Parvati. At the request of the compassionate Uma, Lord Shiva made the child immediately grow up and benedicted him with immortality. Then further, to please his wife, Lord Shiva gave the child a flying city. Parvati also awarded a benediction to the entire Rakshasa race, saying, "Henceforth the women of your dynasty will deliver their babies at the time of conception, and upon birth the child will immediately grow up to be the size of the mother." After receiving these benedictions, Sukesha, the son of Salakatana Kata and Vidyut Kesha, became very arrogant and began roaming at will in his airplane. Considering Sukesha's opulence, the Gandharva named Gramani gave his beautiful daughter Devavati to him in marriage. Thereafter, Sukesha begot three sons by Devavati, Malyavan, Sumali, and Mali. Knowing that their father had become powerful by obtaining benedictions, the three sons went to Mount Meru, determined to gain success by performing of severe austerities. The severe penances of the three sons of Sukesha became fearful for all the living entities. Lord Brahma appeared before the three brothers to fulfill their desires and make them desist from their austerities. Thus, when Lord Brahma offered them benedictions, the brother replied, "O Lord, may we be long lived and become so powerful that we will strike terror into the heart of our enemies. Give us the ability to become invisible at will, and let us three always have love for each other." Lord Brahma gave his consent and departed. Due to their benedictions, Malyavan, Sumali, and Mali became so fearless that they began to harass the demigods, demons alike. Enlightened by their leader's prowess, the Rakshasas approached Vishwakarma in a group, requesting him to build them a place equal to the demigods. Vishwakarma informed the Rakshasas of Lanka, surrounded by golden walls, which he had previously constructed under the order of Indra. Then, at Vishwakarma's urging, the Rakshasas took up their residence there. Soon thereafter, the Gandharva woman Narmada gave her three daughters in marriage to Malyavan, Sumali, and Mali. Through his wife, Malyavan begot many children, including Virupaksha and Durmukha. The wife of Sumali gave birth to Prahasta, Akampana, Dhumraksha, Suparshva, and Prahasa. Through his wife Mali begot Anala, Anila, Hara, and Sampati, who became Vibhashana's four ministers. All these offspring became proud like their fathers and began to harass the demigods. Finally, the demigods and rishis went to Lord Shiva and complained that the descendants of Sukesha were practically driving them out of heaven. When the demigods and rishis requested Lord Shiva to kill these three Rakshasas, however, he replied, "Due to Lord Brahma's benedictions, the son of Sukesha are immune to death at my hands. Therefore, I suggest you approach Lord Vishnu, the supreme infallible person." Thereafter, the demigods and rishis went to see Lord Vishnu, the master of everyone and the supreme personality of Godhead. After offering their obeisances, the demigods prayed, "My dear Lord, we are your eternal servants and you are our eternal master. Because we desire the welfare of all living entities, we are busily engaged in the management of universal affairs. O Lord, you are our only shelter. Thus we have come to inform you of our plight. The sons of Sukesha named Malyavan, Sumali, and Mali have become invincible by the benedictions of Lord Brahma and are harassing us greatly. Even Lord Shiva has refused to fight them. Thus we are now forced to approach your lotus feet for protection." Lord Vishnu replied, "My dear demigods and great rishis, do not fear. I know about Sukesha's sons. Because they have proudly overstepped the bounds of propriety, I have already decided to kill them." Being thus restored to confidence, the demigods again offered prayers of glorification and departed for their respective abodes. Soon thereafter, Malyavan came to learn of Lord Vishnu's assurance to the demigods that he would kill him and his brothers. Malyavan went to consult with Sumali and Mali. Malyavan said, "Since Lord Vishnu has already killed Hiranyakashipu, Kalanemi, and many other powerful demons, he must be exceedingly difficult to conquer." Sumali and Mali replied, "There is no need for us to fear anyone, even Lord Vishnu. Indeed, Lord Vishnu has no personal enmity with us. He has simply been poisoned by the words of demigods. Therefore, let's kill the demigods in retaliation, for they are our real enemies." Coming to this conclusion, all the Rakshasas left Lanka to fight with the demigods. While they were en route to heaven, however, many evil omens manifested, indicating the imminent destruction of the Rakshasas. When Lord Vishnu heard that Malyavan was leading an attack on the demigods, he quickly took up his Saranga bow and the other weapons and mounted the back of his carrier Garuda. As the Lord approached, part of the Rakshasa army was blown away by fierce wind generated by Garuda's flapping wings. Regardless, thousands of other Rakshasas took courage and surrounded Lord Vishnu, attacking him with innumerable weapons. With his Saranga bow, the Lord soon dispersed the enemy soldiers and releasing showers of arrows that issued forth at the speed of mind. After thousands of Rakshasas had fallen mangled upon the battlefield, Lord Vishnu blew his transcendental conch shell, the Panchajanya. Upon hearing that terrible sound, the surviving Rakshasas began running away in fear. Sumali then angrily rushed forward. With a shower of arrows appeared to check Lord Vishnu. This caused the Rakshasas behind him to become enlivened, and they rallied again. Elated at his success, Sumali roared with delight. Just then, however, Lord Vishnu cut off the head of Sumali's charioteer, making the horses carry him wildly away from the battlefield. Mali then rushed forward, piercing the Lord with thousands of arrows. However, without being the least bit pained, Lord Vishnu responded with his own volley of arrows, forcing Mali to retreat from the battlefield. While driving Mali off, Lord Vishnu cut down his flag, broke his bow, and killed his horses, depriving him of his chariot. Mali then grabbed his club and jumped to the ground. He rushed forward and violently struck Garuda on the forehead. Feeling acute pain, Garuda turned away from the blow. Thus, Lord Vishnu was forced to turn his back upon the enemy. Upon witnessing Mali's wonderful feat, the Rakshasa warriors roared with delight. However, hearing the Rakshasa's jubilant reaction, Lord Vishnu became enraged. Thus, even though facing backward, he released his Sudarshana Chakra. The blazing disc then swiftly severed Mali's head. Upon seeing the death of their brother, Sumali and Malyavan became overwhelmed with grief and turned back toward Lanka. Thereafter, as the demigods came to congratulate Lord Vishnu, page 484. Page 484. Thereafter, as the demigods came to congratulate Lord Vishnu in great happiness, Garuda recovered and began dispersing the remaining Rakshasas by flapping his wings. Many of the Rakshasa soldiers thus fell from the sky into the sea. Upon seeing their plight, Malyavan turned back and challenged, "O Vishnu, you appear to be ignorant of rules of combat, for you are attacking those who have given up their intent to fight. Please stay on the battlefield a while longer, so I may punish you for your wicked behavior." Lord Narayan replied, "Your accusation is unjust. I am merely making good my promise to give protection to the demigods, and I shall keep my promise at all costs." At this, Malyavan hurled a great spear. However, when it pierced his chest, Lord Vishnu merely pulled it out and threw it back at the Rakshasa. When the spear hit Malyavan's chest, it shattered the Rakshasa's armor, making him faint on his chariot. Malyavan, however, soon recovered and quickly hurled a club that hit the Lord's chest. Then, coming very close by, Malyavan struck Lord Vishnu on his chest with his mighty fist and began beating Garuda. The enraged Garuda then quickly drove Malyavan away with a blast of air from his wings. Seeing his brother's plight, Sumali fled back toward Lanka with the ashamed Malyavan following. Thereafter, because of their fear of Lord Vishnu, the Rakshasas gave up their residence at Lanka and entered the nether regions. Agastya continued, "Malyavan, Sumali and Mali were more powerful than Ravana and other Rakshasas that were killed by you. However, since the Rakshasas you faced in the battle were all descendants of Pulastya, they were incomparably strong. Therefore, my dear Rama, it can be only concluded that you are none other than Lord Narayana himself, for no one else could have killed these Rakshasas." Agastya continued, while Sumali wandered throughout the nether world in fear of Lord Vishnu, Vaishravana took up his residence at Lanka under his father's orders. Some time later, Sumali took his beautiful daughter with him and left the lower regions to wander the earth in search of a suitable husband for her. It so happened that one day Sumali saw Vaishravana flying over sky in his Pushpaka chariot. Sumali was struck with wonder upon seeing the celestial vehicle. Soon he returned to the nether regions to ponder the fate of the Rakshasas' race welfare. Then, coming to the firm decision, Sumali called for his daughter, Kaikashi, and requested her to accept Vaishrava as her husband. Thereafter, Kaikashi obediently went to Vaishrava's residence and stood shyly before him, her head bent downward as she scratched the ground with her toes. It happened that Vaishrava was in the midst of performing a hot sacrifice, and Kaikashi did not realize that she had approached at an inauspicious time. Still, the magnanimous sage inquired, "My dear young girl, who are you? What's your purpose in coming here?" Kaikashi replied, "I am the daughter of Sumali, and my name is Kaikashi. Whatever you may wish to know, I request that you ascertain by your spiritual prowess." Vaishrava then entered a trance of meditation, and after reading Kaikashi's mind, he said, "I can understand that you desire to receive sons from me. Your wish may be granted because you have approached me. Your wish may be granted, but because you have approached me at an inauspicious time, your sons will become fierce Rakshasas." Kaikashi replied, "I do not wish to have such sons from you, therefore please be merciful to me." Vaishrava then granted, "As a concession, your youngest son will come to be famous as a pious man." In due course of time, Kaikashi gave birth to a hideous child with 10 heads and 20 arms, a huge mouth and long teeth. At the time of his birth, the earth trembled, meteors fell from the sky, and fierce winds blew, bringing terror to the hearts of all living entities. Because of his 10 heads, Vishrava named the child Dashagriva. Then, after some time, Kumbhakarna was born. This child possessed largest body on earth. After Kumbhakarna came a daughter named Surpanaka, who had a very ugly face. The last child was Vibhishana. When this noble son was born, the demigods uttered exclamations of joy and showered down flowers from heaven. Thereafter, Kumbhakarna wandered all over the universe, devouring rishis, while Vibhishana engaged himself in studying the Vedas. Then one day, Kuvera came to see his father while riding in Pushpaka chariot. When Kaikashi saw Vaishravana, he urged her own son, Dashagriva, to become as powerful and as glorious as his half-brother. Hearing these words from his mother, Dashagriva became envious of Kuvera, vowing to become greater than him in all respects. Then, with his mind fixed on performing severe austerities, Dashagriva set out for the holy site of Gokarna, along with his younger brothers. Dashagriva began executing his unprecedented austerities. Because of this, Lord Brahma became very pleased with him and his brothers. At this time, Rama again interrupted politely, saying, "O foremost of rishis, please describe in detail exactly what austerities the three brothers performed." Agastya replied, "Kumbhakarna lit fires all around him during the heat of summer, and while in winter he remained submerged in cold water. In this way he passed 10,000 years without wavering from his determination. Vibhishana stood on one leg for 5,000 years and another one for 5,000 years. He kept his arms above his head while worshipping sun god. Dashagriva went without food for the entire 10,000 years, and at the end of each 1,000-year period gave one of his heads as an offering into sacrificial fire. Indeed, it was just when Dashagriva was about to offer his last head in the sacrifice that Lord Brahma appeared to reward him for his austerities. When he saw Lord Brahma standing before him, Dashagriva bowed down with great respect. Then, when Lord Brahma urged him to accept a benediction, Dashagriva replied in a voice choked with joy, "O my lord, I only have one fear, and that is death. Therefore, please fulfill my desire by granting me the boon of immortality." However, Lord Brahma replied, "It's not possible for anyone within the material creation to have absolute immortality. Even I shall one day have to die. Thus I request you to ask for something else." Dashagriva begged, "Please grant me immunities from the death at the hands of Nagas, Yakshas, Daityas, Danavas, Rakshasas, and the demigods. I do not require immunity from others like human beings and animals, for I consider them to be no more of a threat than the straw in the street." Lord Brahma then declared, "I shall grant you all that you have asked for. Likewise, the heads you previously offered in sacrifice will be restored. I will also give you one more benediction, allowing you to assume any form you like, simply by willing." Brahma then said to Vibhishana, "You may also accept a benediction from me, according to your desire." Vibhishana replied, "My dear Lord, since you are pleased with me, the goal of my life has already been achieved. My only wish is that my mind may always remain steadily fixed upon the path of virtue, even amidst the greatest of the difficulties. In addition, if you so desire, please grant that the knowledge of Brahmastra appear to me upon command, even though untaught." Being very pleased, Lord Brahma replied, "Since you are by nature inclined towards righteousness, although born of a Rakshasa, I shall grant you immortality on the level of the chief demigods." Next, when Lord Brahma was about to offer Kumbhakarna a benediction, all the demigods accompanying him pleaded with folded hands, "This Rakshasa is evil-minded. He has already devoured 7 Apsaras and 10 attendants of Indra, along with numerous rishis and human beings. His only business is to terrorize the entire universe. Since he has already created so much havoc without any benediction, we think that after he receives benedictions from you, he will surely devour the 3 worlds. O Lord, we request that you somehow cast a spell of delusion over Kumbhakarna on the pretext of granting a benediction." After carefully considering the demigod's requests, Lord Brahma mentally summoned his consort, the goddess Saraswati, who came to his side. When the goddess inquired, "Of what service can I be, O Lord?" Brahma replied, "I want you to become the speech within Kumbhakarna's mouth." Thus it so happened that when Lord Brahma requested Kumbhakarna to take a benediction, the gigantic Rakshasa replied, "If you wish to fulfill my desire, then allow me to sleep for many, many years." Lord Brahma immediately replied, "Let it be so." Then, just as the universal grandsire was about to depart with goddess Saraswati and the demigods, Kumbhakarna came to his senses and wondered, "How did these disastrous words come out from my mouth? I must have been bewildered by the demigods." Thereafter, the 3 brothers happily began to live within a forest. When Sumali learned that his 3 grandsons had received benedictions, he gave up all fear and came out from the nether regions. He was accompanied by his followers, including Maricha, Prahasta, Virupaksha, and Mahodara. Sumali immediately went to Dashagriva and immediately went to Dashagriva and embracing him, he said, "By your mercy, our fear of Lord Vishnu, which caused us to flee Lanka, is now gone. Although Kuvera is now occupying the kingdom of Lanka, it originally belonged to the Rakshasas. Therefore, my dear grandson, you should approach your half-brother and take back your rightful kingdom by request, gift, or if by necessary, by force. If you can retrieve Lanka, then I promise you to make the king of the Rakshasas." However, Dashagriva replied, "My dear maternal grandfather, you should not speak like this, for Kuvera is my elder half-brother." Being so admonished, Sumali remained silent. Later, Prahasta approached Dashagriva, saying, "You should know that for great heroes there is no question of so called brotherly feelings getting in the way of self interest. My dear Dashagriva, you should not have criticized Sumali, for he truly gave you good advice. Just consider the sisters, Diti and Aditi, who are both wives of Kashyapa and mothers to demigods and demons. Long ago, the Daityas controlled the universe. Then later, with the help of Lord Vishnu, the three worlds came under the control of the Adityas. Thus, foremost of the Rakshasas, you would not be the first to fight against your brother for sovereignty." In truth, the idea of conquering Lanka appealed to Dashagriva. After considering Prahasta's words for a time, he went with him to Trikuta. Dashagriva first employed Prahasta as his diplomat, who politely requested Kuvera to return Lanka to its rightful owners. However, after receiving Prahasta and hearing his proposal, Vaishravana replied, "This place was given to me by my father. Therefore, I am unwilling to give it up. However, if Dashagriva likes, he may certainly come here and share Lanka with me, allowing us to live without enmity." After Prahasta's departure, Kuvera went to his father and explained Dashagriva's intentions. Vishrava then replied, "Dashagriva had already come here asking me to give him the kingdom of Lanka. However, I harshly rebuked him for his greediness. I warned him that if he went ahead with his plan to conquer and displace you, he would ultimately meet with destruction. Because of receiving benedictions from Lord Brahma, Dashagriva has become too proud and thus fails to discriminate between persons he should respect and those he need not. Now, due to my displeasure, he has become even more wicked-minded. Therefore, I recommend that you and your followers leave Lanka, take up your residence in Kailash, and avoid antagonizing your arrogant half-brother." Thereafter, Kuvera vacated Lanka. When Prahasta informed Dashagriva, he entered the city and began to rule as a king, being installed upon the throne by the Rakshasas. Sometime later, Dashagriva gave his sister Shurpanaka in marriage to Danava king Vijjujiva. Once thereafter, while roaming in the forest, Dashagriva happened to meet Maya Danava and his daughter. When Dashagriva asked him how he had come there, Maya Danava explained, "Long ago, the Apsara named Hema was given to me in marriage. Thereafter, I lived with her for thousands of years. Being very attached, I built a wonderful city for Hema made of gold and jewels. However, 14 years ago, she left me to fulfill some purpose of the demigods. Overcome by grief, I left my beautiful city and am now wandering the forest, hoping to find a suitable husband for my daughter. Besides this girl, I have begot 2 sons through Hema, Mayavi and Dundubi. Now, if I may ask, who are you and what's your purpose in coming here?" When Mayadanava learned that his new acquaintance was the son of an eminent rishi, he decided to give him his daughter in marriage. Thus Mandodari married Dashagriva. Then Mayadanava gave his son-in-law the wonderful spear he had acquired after executing great austerities, which was later to severely wound Lakshmana. After some time, Dashagriva arranged for Vajrajwala, Bali Maharaja's granddaughter, to marry Kumbhakarna, and the daughter of Gandharva king to wed Vibhishana. Mandodari then gave birth to Meghanadha, who later came to be known as Indrajit. Sometime later, drowsiness began to overtake Kumbhakarna because of Lord Brahma's curse. He then requested Dashagriva to build him a palace that was 16 miles long and 8 miles wide, with crystal and golden columns and stairways made of valuable gems. Thereafter, Kumbhakarna entered his palace and began sleeping for thousands of years. Pardon? Sure, yeah, you can read till the end of page 493, please.
Page number 492 to 3, third paragraph. Meanwhile, the proud Dashagriva began killing demigods and rishis without restraint and destroying many of the heavenly pleasure gardens. Kuvera soon learned of the degradation of his half brother. Thus, out of family affection, he sent a messenger to Dasagriva advising him to mend his evil ways, saying, "Once I happened to see Lord Shiva and his wife seated on a mountain peak in the Himalayas, engaging in hostilities. I was curious to see the goddess Uma, but as soon as my left eye fell upon her, it was immediately burned, while my right eye turned grey. In fear, I quickly left that place and proceeded to perform austerities at another location in the Himalayas, hoping to appease Lord Shiva. Finally, after the passage of 800 years, Lord Shiva was pleased to appear before me and offer his sincere friendship. Although the vision in my left eye was fully restored, the Lord informed me that my right eye would forever have to remain grey. O Dashagriva, upon my return home from performing these austerities, I came to learn of your misdeeds. Now, as your well-wisher and relative, I must warn you that the demigods are already planning to destroy you. You must rectify your behavior before it is too late." Upon hearing Kuvera's message, Dashagriva became inflamed with rage. He declared, "It was only out of respect for my elder half-brother that I have remained patient hearing these insults. However, because of this rebuke, I am now determined to not only conquer the three worlds, but to kill the four Lokapalas as well." Saying this, Dasagriva drew his sword and mercilessly struck down the messenger. Then, after feeding the messenger's body to the Rakshasas, Dasagriva mounted his chariot and started for the abode of Kuvera, followed by the 6 ministers Mahodara, Prahasta, Marischa, Sukha, Sarana, and Dhumraksha. After flying through the sky for about 1 hour, Dasagriva came to Mount Kailasa. Thus, when the Yakshas saw the Rakshasas, they approached Kuvera and took his permission to fight. A fierce battle ensued. When it appeared that the Yakshas were getting the better of his ministers, Dasagriva took up his club and began smashing the enemy. Then, when the surviving Yakshas came to Kuvera and informed him of their defeat, Kuvera sent out another army. The Rakshasas again emerged victorious, and Dasagriva then entered the abode of Kuvera. At the gate, a guard boldly blocked Dasagriva's entrance, and when Dasagriva attempted to push his way in, the guard smashed him over the head with a wooden post, causing him to bleed profusely. However, because of benediction from Lord Brahma, Dasagriva could not be killed. He recovered and smashed the guard into the formless lump of flesh, causing the other Yakshas to flee in fear.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. I'll read for some time and then maybe you can read. Kuvera then sent forth his chief commander, Manibhadra, along with 4,000 Yaksha soldiers. During the battle that followed, Prahasta soon killed 1,000 Yakshas. Mahodara killed 1,000 and Maricha killed 2,000. Still, Manibhadra attacked Dhumraksha, making him fall down unconscious. Dashagriva then retaliated by striking Manibhadra's crown, forcing him to turn sideways. Just then, Kuvera appeared on the scene, club in hand. He was accompanied by 2 of his ministers, Shukra and Praushtapada, along with the 2 deities that precede our wealth, Padma and Shankha. Kuvera challenged Dashagriva, saying, "Because you have proudly ignored all propriety and thus acted most sinfully, I shall soon send you to hellish planets so that you may receive what you deserve." After the Rakshasa ministers fled, losing heart after hearing their master chastised in this manner, Kubera rushed forward and struck Dashagriva on the head with his club. Dashagriva, however, was not disturbed in the least, and the two continued exchanging blows. Finally, when neither could gain upper hand, Dashagriva resorted to using Rakshasa's illusions. He assumed different forms, such as a tiger, a cloud, a hill, the sea, and a yaksha. Finally, Dashagriva struck Kubera on the head with his gigantic club, causing the Lord of Wealth to fall unconscious, bleeding profusely. Then Padma, Shanka, and other yakshas quickly removed Kubera from the battlefield, bringing him back to consciousness. Pleased with his victory, Dashagriva took the possession of Pushpaka chariot. He mounted it and set out for the place of Kartikeya's birth, a clump of golden reeds in the Himalayas. Suddenly, however, the Pushpaka chariot stopped ascending the mountains and would proceed no further. Then, as Dashagriva stood with a look of amazement, Nandishvara suddenly appeared before him. This confidential servant of Lord Shiva was a dwarfish, misshapen in appearance, bald and altogether fearful to look at. Nandishvara ordered Dashagriva, "You must turn back at once, for Lord Shankara is sporting on this mountain." As this, Dashagriva became enraged. While getting down from his chariot, he demanded, "Who is this Shankara?" Then as he looked up, Dashagriva saw Nandi with the face of a monkey, standing near Lord Shiva and holding a flaming spear in his hand. Upon seeing the bull carrier of Lord Shiva in this feature, Dashagriva laughed with great disdain. Nandi angrily cursed Dashagriva by saying, "In the future, powerful monkeys will take birth who will annihilate your entire race. I could kill you at once if I so desired, but I will let you be destroyed by your own misdeeds instead." Dashagriva did not care for Nandi's words, however, and replied, "Because you have rudely stopped my chariot, I shall now retaliate by killing your master, Lord Shankara." Dashagriva placed his hands underneath the mountain and began lifting it up. As the mountain shook violently, Parvati stumbled and clung tightly to her lord. Mahadev then pressed down the mountain with his big toe, crushing Dashagriva's arms beneath it. As Dashagriva cried out in great pain, the entire three worlds trembled, so much so that King Indra stumbled while walking on the road. You can read probably till the end of page 497, please. Is that okay? You have to use the mic. Second chapter, upon seeing the plight.
Upon seeing their master's plight, Dashagriva's minister advised him to take shelter of Lord Shiva, also known as Ashutosh, because he is easily pleased. With no other alternative, Dashagriva bowed down and began glorifying Lord Mahadev by reciting hymns from Shamved. 1,000 years passed as Lord Shiva remained seated on the top of the mountain. Then Mahadev became pleased to relieve the pressure of his toe so that Dashagriva could remove his arms. Because of the fierce cries uttered by Dashagriva when his arms were being crushed, Lord Shiva gave him the name Ravana. Thus from that time forward, Dashagriva became known as Ravana. Because his loud cry had made all the demigods also cry out in fear. Thereafter, Ravan began to wander over the earth on the Pushpak chariot, challenging the heroic Kshatriyas. The prudent kings surrendered to Ravana without a fight, and the Rakshasa king easily defeated all the others. One day, Ravana arrived at a forest near the Himalayas and saw a beautiful young girl with matted hair and a deerskin dress. Upon seeing her, Ravana became afflicted by lust, and while laughing aloud, exclaimed, "The practice of austerities in the fire is contradictory to your youthful beauty. My dear young girl, who are you? Why have you decided to come here to live a life of penance?" The girl replied, "I am daughter of the Brahmarishi Kushadhwaja, the son of Brihaspati. My name is Vedavati, because I am considered to be an incarnation of the Vedas. Many demigods and other highly qualified men have approached my father asking for my hand in marriage. However, he has turned them all down, for he feels only Lord Vishnu would make a suitable son-in-law. When Shambhu, the king of Daityas, heard this, he came and killed my father in sleep. My mother then entered the fire of cremation, carrying the body of her husband in her arms. Since that time, I have installed Lord Narayana within my heart and performed austerities, hoping to attain him as my husband. O Ravana, by dint of my ascetic merit, I know everything about you. Therefore, please take your leave and depart without further ado. Getting down from his chariot, Ravana said, My dear lovely girl, I request you to become my wife. Indeed, in comparison to me, who is Lord Vishnu? At this, Vedavati indignantly replied, Who other than you would dare speak disrespectfully of Lord Narayana? As she spoke, Ravana grabbed Vedavati by the hair. Inflamed with rage, the girl immediately transformed one of her arms into a sword, then cut off her hair, thus setting herself free. Then, while lighting a fire, Vedavati said, After being touched by you, I no longer desire to live. I shall not curse you, for that would decrease my ascetic merit. However, I shall take another birth in a divine manner just to encompass your destruction. As Vedavati entered the fire, flowers showered down upon her from heaven. Then, giving up her body, Vedavati next appeared from a lotus flower. Ravana, however, quickly caught her, forced her onto Pushpak chariot and took her back to Lanka.
Thank you, Prabhu. Continuing on page 498. Thereafter, when Ravana showed the reborn Vedavati to his ministers, he was warned that if he kept the girl, she would become the instrument of his destruction. Taking heed, Ravana threw Vedavati into the sea. Then, upon reaching the other shore by employing her mystic power, she came to the sacrificial ground of King Janaka. As King Janaka was leveling the ground with a plough, the girl appeared from the furrow as a baby. Thus it came to be that the Vedavati who had appeared in Satya Yuga became Janaki in the Treta Yuga. As Ravana continued to roam over the earth in Pushpaka chariot, until one day he arrived at the place called Ushirabhija. There he saw King Maruta engaged in the sacrificial performance under the direction of the Brahmarshi Samvartana, a brother of Brihaspati. All the demigods were present in the sacrificial arena, but out of fear of Ravana, they transformed themselves into animals. Indra became a peacock, Kuvera became a chameleon, Yamaraj became a crow, and Varuna became a swan. After entering the sacrificial arena like an unclean dog, Ravana approached King Maruta and challenged, either fight with me or surrendered. King Maruta inquired, Who are you? What do you want from me? Ravana laughed derisively and said, I am the younger half-brother of Kuvera. My name is Ravana, and I have already defeated my illustrious relative in battle. Maruta sarcastically replied, As the conqueror of your elder brother, you are certainly very virtuous. Therefore, I consider you most worthy of being pierced by my arrows. Maruta angrily grabbed his bow, rushing at the king of the Rakshasas. Samvartana, however, blocked his disciples' way, saying, This sacrifice performed for Lord Shiva is not complete yet. My dear king, if it is spoiled, this glorious sacrifice will become the cause of destruction for your entire dynasty. Ravana is very difficult to conquer. Moreover, one who has been sanctified for a sacrificial performance should never become angry or engage in fighting. Being pacified, King Maruta threw aside his bow. As he sat down, Ravana proceeded to devour many of the rishis who had come there to attend the ceremony. Only after Ravana's departure did the demigods resume their normal features. Indra then benedicted the peacocks never to fear snakes. He also made marks to appear on the peacocks' formerly all blue bodies to resemble to his 1,000 eyes. Thus, whenever Indra showers down rains, the peacocks dance as a symbol of their love for him. Please Does everybody has asanas? Please make yourself comfortable. Thank you. Yamraj benedicted the crows to no longer contract the diseases common to other living entities. Additionally, the crows were granted that they would live for as long as humans did not kill them. Now, when the crows are fed, people residing in the abode of Yamaraj become satisfied by that act. Formerly, swans were not all white. However, by the benediction of Varuna, they became white as foam and began enjoying great pleasure in sporting the water. Lastly, Kuvera blessed the chameleon with a golden complexion. Thereafter, the demigods departed for their abodes. Ravana continued challenging great kings to fight or surrender unto him. Many prominent rulers accepted defeat without a fight. One day, Ravana came to Ayodhya, and when he challenged Maharaj Anaranya, the king came out of his capital with a huge army. Although Anaranya's army was completely massacred by the Rakshasas, the king himself was able to seriously wound Maricha, Shuka, Sharana, and Prahasta, forcing them to flee from the battlefield. Maharaj Anaranya then proceeded to shower 800 arrows upon Ravana's head, but the Rakshasa king was not even slightly injured from the attack. Ravana rushed forward quickly and struck Anaranya on the head with his hand, causing him to fall to the ground, fatally wounded. As the king lay dying, he cursed Ravana, saying, "In the future, a descendant in my dynasty named Rama will become the cause of your destruction." While the king uttered his oath, flowers showered down from heaven, and the demigods could be heard beating their celestial drums. As King Anaranya gave up his body, Ravana left that place. Thereafter, one day Ravana happened to meet the great sage Narada while traveling through the sky. Ravana greeted him most politely, and in return Narada praised the exploit of the Rakshasa monarch. Narada said, "O king, since you are so powerful that you can conquer even the great demigods, why are you trying to annihilate the human beings? The poor humans do not deserve to be killed by you, for they are already most unfortunate, being plagued with so many miseries in life." For those who just joined, because it's Ram Navami, we are reading from Ramayana, this book. And we are pretty much towards the very end, where Rama is installed as the king after returning from Lanka. And then he is asking some questions to the sages. And the sages are relating to him the history of Ravana and his prior ancestors in his dynasty. Ravana replied, "O sage, what you say is correct. Since I desire to conquer over the three worlds, I shall now leave aside the human beings and attack Yamaraj, the lord of death." Making up his mind in this way, Ravana immediately departed for the southern quarter. Narada's curiosity was aroused. He wondered, can Ravana actually defeat Yamaraj? If he does, I wonder what sort of universal order will he institute to replace the old one. Thus, to witness the impending battle, Narada quickly went to the abode of Yamaraj, arriving before Ravana. The Lord of Death greeted Narada and then inquired, "O best of the celestial rishis, what is the object of your visit?" Narada replied, "Ravana is on his way here, desiring to defeat you in battle." As the Pushpaka chariot entered the domain of Yamaraj, Ravana could see how all the living entities were reaping the results of their previous pious and impious activities. Some poor souls were suffering various hellish torments, while others were enjoying a high standard of material comfort. Then by his own prowess, Ravana freed all those who were suffering in hell. Enraged at this audacious act, thousands of Yamadutas attacked Ravana and attempted to demolish the Pushpaka chariot. However, regardless of being attacked so viciously, the chariot remained intact due to the prowess of Lord Brahma. When the Yamadutas showered their arrows upon Ravana, his armor became smashed and his limbs became pierced all over. Covered with his own blood, Ravana finally began losing consciousness and fell from Pushpaka chariot to the ground. However, after quickly recovering, Ravana took up an arrow of Lord Shiva and with it began annihilating all the Yamadutas. At this, Ravana and his ministers began roaring loudly, and when Yamaraj heard the uproar, he could understand that the Rakshasa king had emerged victorious. After calling for his death, Yamaraj took up his rod of death, death nooses, and other weapons, and angrily set out to fight. When Yamaraj entered the battlefield, the entire three worlds became agitated, and Ravana's ministers became so overwhelmed with fear that they began to flee in all directions. Ravana, however, remained undisturbed, and as Yamaraja approached, Ravana deluged him with his arrows. The fierce duel that ensued went on for 7 days and nights uninterrupted. The king of the Rakshasas then released 100,000 arrows, and at that time Mrityu, death personified, begged Yamaraj, "O Lord, please grant me permission to kill Ravana. I caused the destruction of the entire cosmic manifestation. Thus, what will be the difficulty in slaying an entity like Ravana?" Yamaraj, however, wished to kill Ravana himself, and as a last resort, he took up his rod of death. As soon as they saw this terrible weapon, all the Rakshasas except Ravana turned and ran away. Lord Brahma then hastily appeared before Yamaraj, and while remaining unseen by others, he said, "O Lord of Death, please do not nullify the benediction I have awarded Ravana. If you release this rod of death, it will not only destroy your enemy, but will kill all the created beings too. Therefore, please give up your intention." Yamaraj yielded to the authority of Lord Brahma and then made himself invisible, since there was no point in continuing the fight. You want to read? Till the end of page 503.
Ravana departed, thinking himself victorious. Thereafter, he entered the ocean and descended to the lower planetary systems. Ravana then conquered Bhogavati, the capital of Nagas, ruled over by Vasuki. After this, he went to attack Manimai, a city made from gems where the Naivata Kavachas resided. These Danavas had also received benedictions from Lord Brahma, and when Ravana challenged them to fight, they were happy to oblige him. The Danavas and the Rakshasas fought for 1 full year, but neither could gain the upper hand. Finally, Lord Brahma came there to stop the fighting, advising the two parties to establish an alliance of friendship. Thus Ravana spent the next years as Danava's guest, and during the time he learned 100 conjuring tricks from them. From Manimai, Ravana went to Rasatala, searching for Varuna's abode. When in the course of his wanderings he came to the city called Asmanagara. Ravana defeated the Kalakayas residing there, and during the battle accidentally cut to pieces his brother-in-law Vijujihwa. After some time, Ravana finally sighted the abode of Varuna, and there he came upon the Surabhi cow, whose milk created the great ocean of milk. After circumambulating Surabhi, Ravana entered Varuna's city. Then, after announcing his challenge to the waters, he killed all the warriors that came to oppose him. Incited with rage, Varuna's sons and grandsons came out with a large army, but they were soon routed by Ravana's ministers. Having retreated, Varuna's sons again came out to fight, this time rising into the air on their chariots and showering Ravana with their arrows, forcing Ravana to turn his face away from the battle. Mahodara then killed all the horses of Varuna's sons, making their chariots fall to the ground. Still, the sons of Varuna remained airborne by dint of their mystic power, and continued to fight with Ravana seated upon Pushpaka chariot.
Thank you. After driving off Mahodara, the sons of Varuna surrounded Ravana and again assaulted him with torrents of arrows. Ravana suddenly flared up with rage. He pierced Varuna's son with his weapons, and they fell to the ground wounded. As Varuna's sons were being carried away from the battlefield by their own men, Ravana ordered one of the Varuna's ministers, "Go convey my challenge to your master. Now that his sons are all vanquished, let the Lord of Water himself come out and fight." The ministers informed Ravana, "Varuna has gone to Brahmaloka to attend a concert given by the Gandharvas. Therefore, O king of the Rakshasas, be satisfied that you have defeated Varuna's sons. Ravana soon returned to Lanka. Along the way, he kidnapped the virgin daughters of many kings, rishis, demigods, and demons. If Ravana saw any girl that he found attractive, he would first of all kill all of her relatives and then forcibly take her on his chariot. In this way, Ravana's chariot became filled with hundreds of girls, all crying out pitifully from the fear and grief. The bereaved girls considered their plight and cursed Ravana, saying, "May the destruction of this wicked Rakshasa come about because of a woman." As soon as these girls uttered these words, flowers fell from the heavens and celestial drums resounded in the sky. Thus, cursed by virtuous women, Ravana's bodily luster immediately began to fade. Shortly after Ravana's return to Lanka, Surpanaka came and fell down at her brother's feet. With tears in her eyes, she wailed, "Oh, how cruel you are to your sister! By killing my husband, you have made me a widow." To pacify Surpanaka, Ravana replied, "My dear sister, please do not give way to grief. I promise to gratify all your desires. Please forgive me, for in the heat of battle I could not distinguish between friend or enemy. Thus I accidentally killed Vidyutjiva." Ravana sent Surpanaka to live under the protection of her cousin Khara. He also dispatched an army of 14,000 Rakshasas so that his brother could firmly establish his supremacy in the Dandakaranya forest. Ravana then went to his sacrificial arena at the Nikumba Bhila grove. There he saw his son Meghanatha wearing a deer skin. With surprise, Ravana inquired, "My dear boy, what are you doing?" Meghanatha was engaged in performing a sacrifice. Thus, to ensure that his vow of silence was not broken, Ushana, the family priest, replied on his behalf, "In your absence, Meghanatha has performed 7 great sacrifices for pleasure of Lord Vishnu. Thus he has received a celestial chariot with various weapons from Lord Shiva. He also gained the power to become invisible and to create darkness within the enemy ranks." Ravana was not very pleased to hear of his son's activities, for he had worshipped one of his enemies, Lord Vishnu. When Vibhishana learned that Ravana had kidnapped so many girls, he approached his brother and said, "This act of yours is very sinful and is unfit for a member of our good family. Already, as a reaction to your wickedness, your mother's cousin, Kumbinasi, has been kidnapped by Rakshasa Madhu." Kumbinasi was the unmarried daughter of Malyavan, the uncle of Ravana's mother, Kaikashi, who was residing in Ravana's palace in his absence. When Ravana heard about Kumbinasi's abduction, he flared up with rage and prepared to kill the offender at once. Calling together all his Rakshasa chiefs, Ravana left Lanka with 4,000 Akshauhinis, for he intended to attack the demigods after dealing with Madhu. With Meghanath at the front and Kumbhakarna at rear, Ravana entered Madhu's city. His mother's cousin quickly came out to meet him and fell at Ravana's feet. He thus assured her, "I shall do whatever you request of me. Please get up, for there is nothing to fear." Kumbinasi then begged Ravana to spare her husband. The Rakshasa king replied, "Yes, it shall be so. Now let Madhu come forward, for I want him to accompany me in my conquest of the demigods." Kumbinasi awakened her husband and informed him that Ravana had come to solicit his help in conquering the demigods. Madhu immediately came and paid his respects to Ravana, and the next morning the Rakshasa army departed. Ravana reached Kailasha just as sun was setting and had his army make camp there. While sitting at leisure on top of hill, Ravana surveyed the beautiful forests and lakes that served as demigods' sporting grounds. Indeed, he could hear the singing of Apsaras coming from Kuvera's palace. The entire atmosphere was extremely pleasing and enhanced by fragrant breezes. At that time, the Apsara Ramba chanced to pass by. When Ravana saw Ramba's beautiful bodily features, enhanced by her attractive dress and tinkling ornaments, he became so lusty that he immediately jumped from his seat and grabbed her by hand. Pierced by Cupid arrows, Ravana said, "O exquisitely beautiful one, your sweet smiling face, your full well-rounded breasts, and your shapely hips and thighs have combined together to steal away my mind. Now that I have seen you, I cannot bear to let you go. Who is there superior to me that you are now on your way to meet? Accept me as your husband and remain with me. It would surely be a waste of your incomparable beauty to have enjoyed it by anyone else. You want to read? All the way till the end of 508 and maybe 2 paragraphs till 509, please. Your good name, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna. Abhishek Malviya.
Abhishek.
Rambha, however, angrily replied, "You should not speak to me like this, for you are just like my father, and I, your daughter-in-law." Ravana then argued, "Only the wife of one's son can be considered to be a daughter-in-law." At this, Rambha countered, "Yes, what you say is correct. Still, you should know that I am the lawful wife of your brother's son, Nal Kuvera, and I am on my way to meet him now. Therefore, O king of Rakshasas, please follow the path of righteousness and let me go at once." Not interested in good advice, Ravana replied, "Your reasoning only applies to women who have one husband. However, since Apsaras have no actual husbands, just as the demigods are not committed to a single wife, I do not have to consider you in the light of such morality." Saying this, Ravana forcibly pulled Rambha down onto a flat rock and began copulating with her. When she was finally released, her hair and dress disheveled, Rambha ran to her husband, Nal Kuvera, and told him everything that happened. Upon hearing of Ravana's misconduct, Nal Kuvera became outraged. Then, to verify Rambha's story, he entered a trance of meditation. Thereafter, having ascertained the truth of the matter, Nal Kuvera touched water and pronounced the following curse: "The head of Ravana will split into 7 pieces if he ever again tries to enjoy a woman against her will." The demigods were overjoyed to hear this declaration and showered flowers down upon Kuvera's son. Similarly, when the women at Lanka, kidnapped by Ravana, heard of Nal Kuvera's oath, they too experienced great happiness. And when Ravana heard of the curse, he gave up all inclination to have sexual relations with the women who were not inclined towards him. The next morning, Ravana mobilized his army and approached the abode of Indra. The king of heaven, being afraid of Ravana, became dejected upon seeing the army of Rakshasas approaching. Indra quickly sent out all the demigods to fight and then approached Lord Vishnu. After offering his obeisances to the Lord, Indra explained, "Because of Lord Brahma's benedictions, I feel helpless in battling Ravana. My dear Lord, I request that you either empower me with sufficient energy to kill Rakshasa king, or else take up the matter yourself." Lord Vishnu reassured Indra, "There is no need for you to be afraid. Go and fight with Ravana. Even though it is not possible for you to conquer him, I do not wish to kill him just now. However, please know that when the time is right, I shall slay not only the wicked Rakshasa king, but all of his relatives too." Thereafter, a fierce battle ensued between the demigods and the Rakshasas, supported by their allies, the Danavas. Ravana's maternal grandfather, Sumali, led the Rakshasa army and soon routed the demigod soldiers. Then Savitra, the 8th Vasu, suddenly entered the battlefield, striking fear into the hearts of Rakshasas. After destroying Sumali's chariot, Savitra picked up the Rakshasa's mace and smashed it over his head, striking him down dead. Being leaderless, the Rakshasa soldiers began to flee. Meghnad then came forward, and the powerful son of Ravana began to scatter the demigods. Indra, however, admonished the fleeing warriors and sent forth his own son, Jayanta, to fight. An equally matched duel thus began between the two princes. However, when Meghnad resorted to creating darkness on the battlefield through his mystic potency, Jayanta became ill at ease. In the darkness, the fighting became gruesome and confused. Puloma, ruler of the Daityas and father of Sachi, the wife of King Indra, came and forcibly grabbed his grandson by the hair, dragging him away from the battlefield for his protection. Puloma dove deep into the sea with Jayanta. Seeing that Jayanta was gone, the demigods panicked and ran away. Indra then immediately called for his chariot. As Indra went out to join the battle, surrounded by other Adityas, a fierce wind began blowing and huge meteors streaked across the sky. Meanwhile, inspired by Indra's presence, the demigods slaughtered the Rakshasas, so that eventually only 1/10 of their force remained alive. Kumbhakarna was also wounded by the combined attack of the Rudra and other celestials.
Now highly enraged, Ravana began penetrating the ranks of the enemy army and approached the heavenly king Indra. As the two rulers proceeded to shower their arrows upon each other, darkness set in, bewildering everyone but Indra. Ravana and Meghanath. Ravana was determined to destroy all the demigods. Indra understood that he could not kill the Rakshasa. Thank you. And thus he advised his warriors to capture him instead. Ravana suddenly rushed at Indra, but the king of heaven drove him back with torrents of weapons. The fear-stricken Rakshasas considered themselves to be defeated, but Meghnath was outraged, and thus invisibly entered the demigod army and came before heavenly king. Sending forth incessant streams of arrows, Meghnath was able to exhaust Indra, and thereupon bound him by the mystic power he had acquired from Lord Brahma. Seeing how Ravana was being overpowered by the demigods, the invisible Meghnath announced to his father, You should retreat from the battlefield, for I have already taken Indra captive. Since victory is yours, there is no need to continue fighting. Hearing this, the demigods became disheartened and at once desisted from the battle. Ravana then instructed Meghnath, Go ahead of me and take Indra to Lanka. I will join you there shortly. In this way, Indra, the king of heaven, became a prisoner of the Rakshasas within their capital city. Lord Brahma then took all the demigods with him and went to Lanka. While remaining stationed in the sky, the universal grandsire addressed Ravana as follows. The prowess and valor exhibited by your son is wonderful indeed. Because of his dramatic victory over the king of heaven, let Meghanath from this day onward be known as Indrajit. O king of the Rakshasas, I request you to release Indra. In exchange, I shall reward your son with incomparable benediction. Indrajit exclaimed, I shall give up Indra for the boon of immortality. Lord Brahma, however, replied, It's not possible for any of the created beings to have unconditional immortality. Therefore, my dear prince, please ask for something else. Indrajit said, as an alternative, grant me the following. At the time of battle, if I offer oblations to the sacrificial fire according to the Vedic injunctions, let a huge chariot emerge from the flames. Then as long as I remain seated upon that chariot, let me be immune to death. Thus only if I engage in battle without having finished the chanting of mantras and offering of oblations, will I be subject to destruction. Some people seek immortality through performance of austerities, but I have acquired it simply by exhibiting my prowess. Lord Brahma granted Indrajit's request, and in return the Rakshasas released Indra. After this incident, Indra became morose and his bodily luster faded. When Lord Brahma approached him and asked, What grievous sin did you commit in the past that is now causing you to suffer so much? Without waiting for Indra to reply, the all-knowing Brahma narrated the following story. In the beginning of creation, there was only one type of human being. There was no distinction in the bodily features. Then, to create diversity and increase population, I created the first woman, giving her the name Ahalya, which means one who possesses even the slightest ugliness, one who does not possess even the slightest ugliness. You go ahead, Prabhu. Your name? Balakrishna. Yes, Balakrishna. Thank you. Go ahead. Abhishek, thank you for reading. And you can continue till page 514, first chapter. Balakrishna.
Sure. Page number 512, second paragraph. While contemplating whose partner this girl would be, I kept her in the care of Gautama's Rishi for many years. O Indra, during this time you confidently assumed that I would give Ahalya to you as a consort. However, when Gautama later returned the girl to me, I was impressed by his self control. I decided that Ahalya could become his wife. All the demigods, especially yourself, were upset by my decision. Thus, being overcome by lust and anger, you went to Gautama's ashrama, and when you saw the beautiful Ahalya, you forcibly raped her. After your departure, Gautama came to know of your sinful act. Thus, in great anger, he cursed you, saying, "One day, O lusty king of heaven, you will be captured by your enemies while fighting on the battlefield." Furthermore, when this abominable act that you have initiated becomes prevalent in human society, anyone who commits this sin will get only half of the reaction, and you will get the other half. Thus, from now on, the position as the king of heaven will never be secure, not only for you, but future Indras also. After chastising Indra, Gautama cursed his wife for her infidelity, saying, "From now on, you must remain in this asrama as a stone pillar." Additionally, you will no longer have the distinction of being the only woman. All other women will receive a share of your beauty. Ahalya then pleaded, "My dear husband, Indra came here disguised as you and then forcibly raped me. Please be merciful unto me, for I am faultless." Gautama then informed his wife, "In the future, Lord Vishnu will take birth in the Ishwaku dynasty and he will be known as Rama. In the course of performing his transcendental pastimes, he will come here in the company of Vishwamitra. By seeing Lord Rama and offering him your hospitality, you will become free from my curse and reinstated as my wife." Brahma continued, "My dear Indra, you should know that all of your present difficulties are due to the curse of Gautama. To counteract the effects of that curse, I suggest that you perform a sacrifice to please Lord Vishnu. In this way, you will become purified and thus be able to return to your post in heaven. Now there is one more thing you may know from me. Your son has been taken away by Paloma and is being kept deep within the ocean. Thereafter, by following Lord Brahma's direction, Indra regained his heavenly position and became free from all anxieties." While hearing about the extraordinary prowess of Indrajit, Rama and Lakshmana uttered exclamations of great wonder. Then Rama again inquired, "O best of the rishis, was there ever an instance of Kshatriya who defeated Ravana?" Agastya replied, "Once while wandering over the earth, Ravana came to the city of Mahishmati, ruled by Kartaviryarjuna, king of the Hayas. That day, Kartaviryarjuna had gone to the river Narmada to enjoy himself in the water with many attractive women. Thus, when Ramana inquired from a minister about the Kartaviryarjuna's whereabouts, he was informed that king had gone out. Ravana departed, and after going to Vindhya mountain, he came to the banks of Narmada. Stepping down from the Pushpaka chariot, Ravana sat down on the shore with his ministers and said, "This holy river is very glorious. You should all take a ritualistic bath to receive yourself of all sinful reactions. You should all take ritualistic bath to relieve yourself of all sinful reactions. Meanwhile, I shall engage in the worship of Lord Shiva. Bring me some flowers for an offering." While the ministers looked for mountain flowers for Ravana's offering, Ravana took his bath and chanted the Gayatri mantra. Coming out of the water, Ravana took off his wet clothes and put on new white garments. Ravana always kept Shivalinga with him, and now he placed the deity in the sand and began dancing in ecstasy before it, waving his arms about. Kartaviryarjuna was a short distance downstream, sporting with his female companions. Desiring to test the strength of his 1,000 arms, Kartaviryajna began to block the water's flow. Thus the water backed up, overflowing its banks and washing away Ravana's flowers just as he was about to offer them in worship. At this, Ravana angrily summoned Sukha and Sarana, ordering them to find out the cause of the river's unnatural flow. Rising into the air, the ministers went downstream. When they had gone only 4 miles, they saw Kartaviryajna playfully blocking the river's flow. When Ravanas heard this, he immediately set out for battle, accompanied by all his ministers. While going along, Ravana saw numerous inauspicious omens. Still, without being deterred in the least, Ravana soon came within Kartaviryajna's vicinity. When Kartaviryajna's ministers approached him, Ravana ordered, "Announce my arrival to your king and tell him I have come to challenge him to fight." One of the ministers replied, "It is not proper for you to challenge Kartaviryajna while he is intoxicated and in the company of women. Therefore, please spend the night here, and in the morning you can fight. However, if you are so impatient that you cannot wait, then you will have to defeat us before approaching our master." Responding to their challenge, Ravana's ministers immediately killed and devoured Kartaviryajna's ministers. Kartaviryajna's army then rushed at the intruders, but they too were soon exterminated. The survivors then hastily went to report what happened to Kartaviryajna. Hearing this, Kartaviryajna got out of water, grabbed his club, and began to drive away the Rakshasas. Prahasta daringly stood up to Kartaviryajna and hurled a flaming mace. The Haihaya king deftly deflected it with his own mace and then severely struck Prahasta, knocking him to the ground. Seeing Prahasta fallen, Ravana's other ministers ran away in fear.
Thank you, Balakrishna. Ravana then rushed at Kartaviryarjuna, and they proceeded to violently strike each other with their clubs. However, neither grew tired. Then Kartaviryarjuna hurled his club against Ravana's chest. Although the club broke into pieces, Ravana was thrown back at a bow's length, crying out as he fell to the ground in agony. Kartaviryarjuna quickly rushed forward and, after catching hold of Ravana, tied him with a strong rope. The demigods were elated to witness this heroic feat, and thus they showered Kartaviryarjuna with flowers while continually praising him. Prahasta and the other Rakshasas then rushed forward while throwing torrents of weapons. However, Kartaviryarjuna simply caught all these weapons in his hands and drove away the Rakshasas. He then took captive Ravana and entered Mahishmati. When Pulastya heard that his grandson was However, when Kartaviryarjuna simply caught all these weapons in his hands and drove away the Rakshasas, he took captive Ravana and entered Mahishmati. When Pulastya heard that his grandson was being held captive, can you take the baby out, please? Okay, where were we? Okay, there. However, when Kartaviryarjuna simply caught all these weapons in his hands and drove away the Rakshasas, he then took captive Ravana and entered Mahishmati. When Pulastya heard that his grandson was being held captive, he went to meet Kartaviryarjuna. When the ministers saw the great Rishi descending from the heavens, they hurriedly informed the Haihaya king of his arrival. Kartaviryarjuna then came before Pulastya with folded hands. After providing him with a royal reception, he asked, "O foremost of the illustrious personalities, of what service can I be?" Pulastya replied, "Kindly release the Rakshasa king, for you have proven your power far excels." Without uttering a word, Kartavirya Arjuna released Ravana. The ruler of the high Ayas also gave the Rakshasa king various presents, thus forming an alliance between the two. Finally, Kartavirya Arjuna bowed down before Pulastya and entered his palace, while the son of Lord Brahma, Pulastya, ascended into the sky. Although Ravana was embarrassed because of his defeat, he continued to wander over the earth, defeating countless Kshatriyas. Finally, he came to Kishkindya, ruled by Vali, who wore a golden necklace presented to him by King Indra. When Ravana expressed his desire to fight, Sushena, Angada, Sugriva, and the minister Tara replied, "Vali is not here now, but will be returning shortly. O great Rakshasa hero, just look at this heap of bones. This is all that remains of those who challenged Vali in the past. We can assure you that you will come to a similar end. My dear king, if you are very impatient, not wishing to wait, then you can find Vali on the shore of the southern ocean." Ravana then mounted the Pushpaka chariot and flew into the southern sea. There he saw Vali absorbed in saying prayers. Ravana wanted to capture the monkey king alive and began to creep up silently from behind. Vali, however, was able to see Ravana from the corner of his eye. Remaining undisturbed, Vali thought, "I shall capture this Rakshasa when he comes close by and keeping him under my arm. Then, leaving him dangling, I will be completing my worship by visiting 3 other oceans." Vali could hear Ravana's footsteps. When he drew close, Vali suddenly whirled about and caught him. Then, pressing Ravana tightly under his arm, Vali sprang into the air towards his next destination. Ravana's ministers quickly came to his rescue, but they could not catch Vali. Thus Vali continued his tour of the 4 seas and finally returned to Kishkindya. Vali was exhausted from carrying Ravana such great distance and thus put him down in the park. Then, laughing disdainfully at Ravana, Vali asked the dazed Rakshasa who he was. With genuine admiration, Ravana introduced himself and said, "The astonishing speed that you travel through the air is only matched by 3 others, the mind, Vayu, and Garuda. O king of the monkeys, you are truly an exceptional hero. Therefore, I wish to establish friendly relationships with you. Please accept me as your ally." So we have about 13 more minutes remaining, up to 1. So, Abhishek, you want to read? Yeah, we can read maybe till the page 519, towards the end, almost page 520. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna. Thereafter a sacrificial fire was lit, and when their friendship was thus formalized, Ravana and Vali warmly embraced. Ravana continued to reside at Kiskindhya for 1 month as the honored guest of the monkey chief. At this point Rama said, "O Rishi, Ravana and Vali were certainly powerful heroes, but I feel that Hanuman's prowess exceeds both of them. Indeed, during my conquest of Lanka, it was he alone who enabled me to become victorious and recover Sita. I cannot properly express my debt to Hanuman, the best of my unalloyed servitors. O great sage, I still have some doubt that I pray you can dispel. Why is it that when there was enmity between Vali and Sugriv, that Hanuman did not vanquish Vali? I think Hanuman could not have been aware of his own prowess. Otherwise, how could he have stood by idly and watched Sugriva suffer? O foremost of rishis, you are the knower of all mysterious truths. Therefore, please explain the transcendental pastimes of Hanuman, so my doubt can be removed." Hanuman was also present in the assembly, listening to the conversation, and he experienced great transcendental bliss upon hearing Ram's statement. The great sage Agastya then answered, "It is true that no one can equal Hanuman in strength, speed or intelligence. However, it so happened that he forgot his actual prowess. I will recount the story of his life to explain why. Hanuman was begot by Vayu through Anjana, the wife of Kesari, a monkey chief who used to reside on the Mount Meru. After delivering the child, Anjana went to gather some fruit for him. In her absence, however, the hungry baby started to cry. At that time, the sun began to rise. When the baby monkey saw the luminous orange globe, he thought that it was a fruit and suddenly sprang upwards to catch it. When the demigods saw the son of Vayu flying swiftly through the air, they became astonished, declaring, "Not even the mind or Garuda can move so fast. If this monkey shows so much ability as a baby, what will he be like when he grows up?" Vayu followed his son to protect him from the scorching heat of the sunshine. Then, as the baby monkey approached, Surya refrained from consuming him in consideration of his childish innocence and the future mission he would perform on behalf of Ram. Thus, the son of Vayu was able to take his seat upon the chariot next to Surya. Just at that time, Rahu happened to come to attack the sun god. Instinctively, the baby monkey grabbed Rahu, but in the next moment, Rahu, the worst of planetary controllers, slipped from his clutches. Rahu fearfully approached Indra and complained, "Although I have been allotted the sun and moon as the means for appeasing my hunger, it appears that my share has been appropriated by another. Just now, when I approached the sun god, I saw that another Rahu was attacking him." Indra was quite astonished to hear this, and he thus mounted Airavat and set out towards the sun. Rahu had gone ahead, and when the son of Vayu saw him coming, he considered him to be a type of gigantic fruit and sprang from Surya's chariot to catch him. Rahu immediately began to flee, crying out for Indra's protection. Thus the king of heaven, who approached from nearby, gave him assurance. Then, when the hungry baby sighted Airavat, he took the elephant to be an enormous white fruit and rushed toward him. When Indra saw the son of Vayu approaching, he immediately released his thunderbolt. The baby monkey crashed down on a mountain, broke his jaw, and thus gave up his life. This enraged Vayu, who then took his son and withdrew into a mountain cave. Vayu ceased acting as the air of respiration, and all living entities began to suffocate, their bowels and bladders becoming obstructed. With bloated bellies, the demigods hurriedly approached Lord Brahma, anxiously informing him of their plight. Lord Brahma said, "O celestials, it is due to Vayu's anger that you are now suffering. Just try to understand the importance of the wind god. Although he has no perceivable material body, he moves within the bodies of all created beings. Indeed, without the wind, a material body is no better than a block of wood. Therefore, I suggest that we all approach Vayu and pacify him for the welfare of the entire world."
Thank you. Lord Brahma led the demigods to Vayu's cave. The wind god was tormented by death of his son, whose body he still held in his arms. After Vayu offered his obeisances, Lord Brahma affectionately placed his hand upon the baby monkey's head and immediately brought him back to life. Upon the revival of his son, Vayu resumed circulating within all the creatures. Thus the living entities again became joyful. Lord Brahma then told the assembled demigods, "In future, this child will act for your welfare. Thus all of you should award him benedictions." Hearing Lord Brahma's command, Indra took off his garland of lotus flowers and placed it around Hanuman's neck. Indra declared, "Because of his broken jaw, this child will be henceforward be known as Hanuman. He need no longer fear my thunderbolt, for he will be immune to its effects." The sun god announced, "I hereby donate 1% of my brilliance to Hanuman. Furthermore, I grant him full knowledge of scripture and benedict him with eloquent speech." Yamaraj then said, "I hereby grant Hanuman immunity from my rod of death and from all diseases." Kuvera declared, "Let Hanuman be immune to my mace and never become tired in the battle." Lord Shiva said, "I grant that Hanuman will never become killed by me or one of my weapons." Vishwakarma announced, "I award Hanuman the benediction that he cannot be killed by any weapon I have manufactured." Lastly, Lord Brahma said, "I grant Hanuman a long life, magnanimity, immunity to Brahmastra, and immunity to the curses of the Brahmanas. Lord Brahma then said to Vayu, "This child will be able to change his form at will and shall be unconquerable. He will be able to travel wherever he likes and at any speed he chooses. In the future, he will perform glorious activities that will aid in the destruction of Ravana. Thus, he will become very pleasing to Lord Ram." The demigods departed, and Vayu placed Hanuman under the care of his mother Anjana. After receiving so many benedictions, Hanuman was bursting with energy. He began to act fearlessly. Sometimes he even offended prominent rishis by interrupting their sacrifices and breaking their paraphernalia. While Hanuman indulged in these pranks, the rishis tolerated him, for they knew that he was immune to death from their curses due to Lord Brahma's benedictions. Hanuman's foster father Keshari, and his natural wife, father Vayu, tried their best to discipline him. Still, Hanuman continued to transgress the bounds of propriety. Thus the rishis became little angered at him and declared, "For now you shall remain ignorant of your true prowess. At proper time you will again become aware of your full potency." Thereafter, Hanuman began wandering through the forest in a peaceful mood. At this time, the king of the monkeys, Riksharaj, succumbed to death from old age. His eldest son Vali assumed the throne, while Sugriva became the heir apparent. From childhood, Hanuman and Sugriva were best friends. However, when hostility broke out between the two brothers, Hanuman was not aware of his true prowess, and thus he did not help Sugriva fight Vali. Because of his ignorance of his great power, Hanuman became more interested in cultivation of knowledge than exhibition of force. To learn all areas of Vedic knowledge, he would follow the sun god the full distance from wherever he rises to wherever he sets. Hanuman would put forward innumerable questions, and eventually he became as learned in the Vedas as Brihaspati. In this way, Agastya Rishi described the glories of Hanuman. Rama, Lakshmana, and the monkey chiefs were amazed and delighted to hear them. When the assembled rishis decided to go, Rama said, "Now that I have been installed as the emperor, I want to perform many sacrifices for the welfare of the world. I request you all return home so that sacrifices may be performed under your supervision." Happily giving their consent, the rishis departed. The next morning, awakened by professional singers who recited his glories, Rama bathed and sat down to perform fire sacrifices. Thereafter, Rama visited the temple palace and proceeded to the royal court. Seated upon the royal throne and surrounded by his monkeys, servants, and 20 of the monkey chiefs, Rama administered the state government in an exemplary manner. So we'll read for one more minute and then we can stop here. And I think we need to organize one more session to wrap up, because we'll have Bhakti Shastri class at 1 o'clock. King Janaka was one of the many great kings that came to Ayodhya to attend Rama's coronation. After some time, Rama approached him saying, "My dear father-in-law, you should now return to your kingdom, Vidarbha, lest it has become neglected. Bharata, Shatrughna will escort you there with a large army." Janaka consented, and Rama honored him with many valuable presentations. Janaka gave all the presents to his beloved daughter Sita and happily departed for home. Rama then addressed his maternal uncle, the Kaikeya king, Yudhajit. "Because your father is now very old, you too should return to your kingdom and take care of him. Lakshmana will accompany you with large army." Yudhajit gave his consent, and after his departure, Rama bid farewell to his friend, the king of Kashi. Altogether, Rama bade farewell to the 300 kings and princes that had come to Ayodhya to celebrate his coronation. After returning home, all these kings sent their escorts and back with many valuable presentations for Rama. When he received all these gifts, Rama immediately gave them away to Sugriva, Vishnu, and the other monkeys and Rakshasas. So we'll stop here, the reading for today, page 524. And I think we have about 25 pages or so. Then we can complete that. Thank you very much for attending the Ramayana. Hare Krishna.